ドーッとドーッとドーッといきましょう。盗んだバイクで走り出し、愛と平和を叫んだ時はいつもの
Hello, everyone, and welcome to One Kill More Podcast, episode 314. I'm Benjamin Yoder, here today talk to you about video games, although we're going to have, at the start of this show, a little less about video games. So I had a little bit of some personal stuff I had to deal with this last week, so I don't have a lot of personal game updates. I did start playing Street Fighter VI, but we're not going to talk about that this week. So instead, we're going to talk a little bit about I watched the Mario movie, so I want to kind of talk about my impressions of that a little bit. I also started a new manga, and since we're a little short on game content this week, I figured that might be a fun thing to talk about as well. It's been a long time since we talked about like an anime or manga, I feel like. And then just some news stories that I just want to kind of comment on briefly. Most of these are from the Xbox Direct and Summer Game Fest shows. So, per usual, I'm not going to go through everything. I just don't think it's worth my time because I imagine most people listening to the show already know the news that came out of there. So I'm really just going to focus on things that I personally have any, specific insight into, or something just like caught me off guard and I just want to kind of note that kind of thing. So we'll talk about those things in the kind of the back half of the show. So no real game impressions this week, although I did get Jack Jean in the mail, or Jack Jean or something like that. Which if you don't know is a game we talked about on the podcast a long time ago with, or I haven't gotten it yet. It comes in tomorrow actually, but, it is the, kind of like an otome game with, rhythm elements, things like that. So it looked really cool and I went ahead and ordered it. The localization was announced a long time ago for it and they took pre-orders and I wasn't sure like how available it was going to be. I didn't know like Axis's whole thing and like how often their stuff is like available or if it's like a limited time thing. Seems like you can just kind of pick it up on Amazon, so maybe not the greatest choice. And, the reality is that right now there's very little chance I'm going to get to it anytime soon, unfortunately. So maybe a little bit of a waste. I would love to play it. We'll see. I've been saying recently I'm a fake otome game fan because I like talking about otome games, but do not play any of them, so, or have not yet. I do want to, but like Buddy Mission Bond isn't an otome game. It just kind of like has vague feelings of like an otome game kind of thing, so. And one thing I haven't talked about on the podcast really is that I've been doing things on the One Killboard Twitter recently. I don't know what you want to call them, like Twitter bits or video gaming bits. Video gaming bits has been like an ongoing name I continue to use for like various things that kind of represent what this is. But essentially, I started making tweets that kind of focus heavily on things about games that I appreciate. And I've been doing this for about 2 weeks now, and I had a trial run about a month or two ago where I tried it out, and I got some good response then. I haven't had a great response to the more recent stuff, unfortunately, I will say, so we'll see how much I keep up with it. There's a handful of people who are kind of checking in normally, but I haven't really had any ones that really took off beyond like Golden Sun, reached like a larger audience for the most part, but most other people, it doesn't seem to have reached them. Which, sometimes I'm like talking about things like Lady Santa, which I really don't expect Lady Santa to reach people. So sometimes I'm just having a good time. But other things in there that maybe are a little bit more mainstream and I might expect to have a little bit more traction that I would expect, didn't get. Like Rhythm Thief. I had a Rhythm Thief post, and like the Rhythm Thief community I think is pretty, small but tight-knit and will typically kind of engage with each other, where it just didn't seem to get like any of their feeds or anything like that. So we'll see. I'm just enjoying doing them right now. So as long as I'm still enjoying doing them, I'm just going to keep doing them. But if it becomes too much of a burden or I start it definitely comes at the cost of time. That's for sure. But it's like 20, 30 minutes, maybe an hour if it's like something that I struggle with a little bit to figure out what I want to say. But for the most part, it's a sub 1 hour thing. So it's not taking up that much time. But I am doing it most days of the week right now. And that might change because, that is still like when you add all that up, we're getting close to like 5 hours a week. I'm working on something like that, right? So it's quite a bit. So anyways, we'll see. It was originally going to be like a YouTube short series, but the production of making YouTube shorts is just like more higher. And like, I don't know if I really have, I don't know. Like I should make YouTube shorts, but I don't know if all the things I would want to do with that would really fit a YouTube short type thing as well. So anyways, that stuff aside, Mario movie. What is this movie called? Super Mario Brothers, the movie? Is that what it's called? I don't remember. So I finally got around to watching this. We have movie nights in our Discord. So if you are interested in that and joining the community and like watching our some movies there, we typically watch some stuff there. And this week we watched the Super Mario Brothers movie. And if you don't know, previously I watched the Sonic the Hedgehog movie and really liked that. We also talked about, I think, Final Fantasy 15 Comrades on here. Not Comrades, Final Fantasy 15 Kingslave. And while I think I'm a bit biased on that because I'm a Final Fantasy 15 Comrades fan and like Comrades and Kingsblade kind of are connected in a lot of ways, I did like that movie quite a bit as well. But, you know, I think Final Fantasy 15 Comrades, Kingsglaive does kind of fall on the side of things of like it makes more sense for context for 15 rather than it's like its own movie kind of thing. But on the bright side, it feels like its own movie, and it doesn't feel like kind of what I think the Super Mario Brothers movie turned out to be, which is more or less just kind of like a fun fest of wink, wink, nudge, nudge kind of things. I feel like, I mean, it's good. I think like the dialogue, I think is well written. It's funny. But I just don't think like movie structure wise, it worked out very well in my opinion. I just think the story and like, I think there's just too much going on, and so it like doesn't really give the thing any time to breathe. So like the things that would be interesting, like, oh, what type of character is Peach in this movie, or like how is Mario and Luigi's relationship in this movie, and things like that, don't get the time they need to shine. And so like if I wanted those things to be explored in a movie format in more interesting ways, this movie doesn't do that, which is really unfortunate because the beginning of the movie I think does do a great job of looking at Spike, which was the antagonist from Wrecking Crew, and giving Spike a place in that world and a purpose in that world in a way that matters. And Spike kind of disappears after the first chunk of the movie. He kind of comes back later, but for the most part, he more or less just disappears. But what he means at the beginning of that movie, I think, is very important. And I think that they probably... I think more of that. And I think what that would really needed was like a reining in of scope. But I think they really wanted to make this movie something where anybody who has engaged with the Mario franchise over the last 30, 40 years, however long it's been, can look at it and say, oh, I remember that. Whether you're a kid playing Mario Kart 8 today, whether you're somebody who played Donkey Kong the arcade a long time ago, or if you're somebody who knows about more obscure Nintendo knowledge and stuff like that, right? You know, quote, obscure Nintendo knowledge. Like in the sense of like where we're at on the internet, like you listening to this podcast is not very obscure at all. Like stuff like, you know, Discoon being in the background and stuff like that from the Famicom. But like in the scale of the mainstream, it very like fairly obscure knowledge, right? And it does that. It is a movie that, like, at any point, as long as you've engaged with Mario in some way, you will get some kind of wink at you and be like, hey, remember that? But to me, a lot of times it feels like it comes off in the way that, like, if you remember, like, the back half of, like, Reggie's presence at Nintendo, and there were things that became memes with him, earlier on that kind of came back, and specifically, this one I specifically kind of got kind of frustrated, it's not really the word, but like I get this feeling by, is when Reggie would say, my body is ready. He would say, my body is ready so much. And it definitely just feels like, okay, bud. And it's like, that's how I feel about a lot of the stuff here. Like, okay, bud, it's on like Donkey Kong. Okay, bud. Like, I don't know. Like, I don't know. Anyways, but like that it's on like Donkey Kong is for somebody who is like, you know, kind of disconnected from what's happening for the most part, and, you know, are just taking their kids, I think, to the movie theater, right? But it does have the stuff for like, you know, the parents and kids and stuff like that who are engaged with Mario as well as teens and things like that too, right? And people like me as well. But I just think it's like not done in a very tasteful way. It's done in a very low-hanging fruit way. which I just think is a little disappointing. And I just think the core structure of the movie is just not strong. I understand why people don't like the movie, like why it got a bad review score initially, because I think as a movie it's not particularly good, but the pieces around it as a fan film and things like that, or a film for fans, things like that, Nintendo fans, my cat's running around, sorry if you're hearing all that jingle. I don't think it is, I think it's a lot better as just like that. But otherwise, I think other than the beginning of the movie with like Spike, the foreman and things like that, and Mario's family, that stuff is the strongest stuff. And like the rest of it could kind of not exist and wouldn't matter, in my opinion. That is the part of the movie that does anything. And I really wish they kind of focused more on that. And I think that's like what made Sonic the Hedgehog 1 work so well in the movies, is that it focused more on what makes the movie good and what Sonic means in a good movie, not, how we can do a bunch of wink nudges to people. Like, they definitely do that still, but they implement elements of Sonic's worlds in ways that make sense in this movie world. So yeah, I just think it's a bit of a weak movie in that regard. And I am hopeful that when they do a new movie, because it's not being viewed maybe as much as like a one-shot thing of like, this may or may not turn out, it gives them space to be willing to slow down and cover some of these stories a bit more substantially. And so my hope is that the next movie is has a bit more story to it. So yeah. But that's my personal feelings on it. I think if you love it, you love it, right? So enjoy yourself. That's good. And I think it's like a fun Nintendo fan thing. And, it is cool to see a lot of like movies do well. I personally prefer the older Mario movie, I think, at this point, if I were to take that from my gut. I've not watched the live action Mario movie in a long time. But I do seem to recall that movie being cooler, because I do think it does kind of more of the Sonic thing where it takes the Mario universe and puts it in a movie and just like says, what does Mario mean for this world, rather than, try to make a bunch of like wink, nudge kind of things. But I should rewatch it at some point and see how I feel about it. So anyways, that's that. The manga I started reading is ongoing at the moment, but a friend recommended it to me. It's called This Uncle Likes Cute Things. And I don't have a ton to say about this, but basically it's a manga about like this, I think he's like in his 40-year-old guy who has loved cute things his whole life and has kind of tried to hide it and like ended up getting in a divorce, it sounds like, because of it. His wife was like, that's weird that you like cute things, basically, I think. And it's a really fun, cute little thing where like basically it's him trying to hide his love for cute things, but then he's like interacting with people in the world who like he doesn't want them to know, but at the same time they have like their own little weird hangups. Like there's one guy who's like trying to basically expose him in some way when he doesn't care what it is. He doesn't know he likes cute things, but if he can get him on for liking cute things, he will, kind of thing. But like he also has a love for cats, so like he has his own little weakness, and so he's like the main guy is aware of this guy's love for cats, but he's like okay with it, he doesn't care. But then the other guy is just like, you're gonna do that to like you're gonna exploit that against me and things like that. So it's kind of cute. There's also like a nephew who lives with the uncle. And the nephew is just like a really cute kid who is like way too considerate to his uncle, probably. He's probably too good of a kid. Just like the unrealistic teen. But he's like very kind to his uncle, but his uncle is still like worried about what he'll think about him. So the kid kind of unknowingly feeds this like cute aspect to his life, although it seems like, as far as I can tell, that the kid's like maybe catching on that he likes cute things, maybe. And then there's like another guy he meets that's like very openly cute, maybe not openly cute, but he's like he wears his love for cute things on his sleeve, but he doesn't like necessarily like people liking that, they know that like it seems like he gets excited and he can't hold his excitement in. But it seems like if he can, he wants to avoid other people telling that. So like, there's like some weird camaraderie and stuff like that. So, for me, as somebody who is like, essentially a straight guy who likes cute things, right? It's very, know if relatable is the right word, but it definitely speaks to me in a way. So I think that's part of why I really like it. But it's only like 12 chapters in right now. And the problem with ongoing things is that, it can take years and years and years to go anywhere. So there's a very good chance I'll fall off of it at some point, and then like 2 years from now be like, oh yeah, that thing. And then pull it back up and be like, where are you at? And it's going to be like ongoing. I'm like, all right, well, I'll catch up again. And then a decade from now, we can wrap this up. Thanks, manga. So yeah, but they didn't really have a lot to say about that. I just thought it was pretty cute. So anyways, that's it for that. We're going to do a Jillian's Corner question before we get into the Summer Game Fest Xbox Direct stuff here real quick. So Jillian asked a question, as she does. Again, thank you, Jillian, for supporting us on Ko-fi. There is a new video on Ko-fi right now. It is the Monolith Soft ranking video of ranking Future Redeemed, Future Connected, and re-ranking some Xenosaga games. So if you're interested in those things, that is there. And that's on the Ko-fi alongside the Chase Jokers video, as well as the Dragon Quest Dai Crossblades video as well. So, just $1 and you can get those videos and take a look. Otherwise, eventually they'll end up on the channel. I don't really know when they're going to end up on there anymore. I haven't thought about it that much. I'm trying not to think about the OCP Plus channel as much as possible, honestly, right now. Just because whenever I think about it, I get in the unhealthy state of like, I got to pump stuff out there. And like that channel is more or less like, I like that channel because I could just be whatever I want it to be. But at the same time, it's like not gonna go anywhere. So I don't need to like invest a ton of time there. I just need to upload there as it makes sense and as I enjoy my time there, basically. So yeah. But Jillian asked the question: what's a game that would be amazing if not for the controls? Well, actually, I have a game that is on the mind for this. So I mentioned the Twitter bits thing earlier. So one of the games I recently talked about on there is a game called Domino Rally. I think it's called like Everyday's Milan in Europe. I don't know what the Japanese name is, but it's very like Katamari Damacy like. But the thing that's like kind of fascinating about it is like probably one of the most intense uses of the Wii Remote's controls of any game, because basically what happens is you're this guy and you set up dominoes in front of you, or there's sometimes dominoes already there. It depends. You have to kind of like bridge dominoes together. And you use the Wii pointer to place dominoes on the field. It like usually happens like in basically a stack of 10, and those dominoes are on set paths for the most part. So you can change different courses, but it's like all kind of preset places that you can change directions and things like that, right? So you can choose where you go, but more or less it's all on rails, kind of like a train track, and how that would work. But in addition to needing to use the pointer to do this, one thing about the game as well is it's a score-based game, one, but B, to go faster, you need to shake the Wii Remote, and you need to shake the Wii Remote in time with the steps on the dominoes. And this game moves fast. So, if you're stepping on those dominoes quick, you are rapidly shaking that Wii Remote within a particular rhythm. And if you're trying to build a domino path in front of you while you are rapidly shaking the Wii Remote, as you can probably imagine, it is very, very hard to do that. And in some ways, I really respect this game for going so hard on the controls. However, I will say it makes the game, I think, way more difficult to play than it probably should be. And I think it does hurt the game overall. I think Domino Rally as a game probably would do better on something like a PS2 or something like that, where you could press the button and then, use the analog stick and then maybe press the square button to basically place the dominoes in front of you, and then use the analog stick to change the direction of the dominoes you're placing. I think that would be a better game, honestly. I could be wrong, but I think there are some Wii games that are just like that. Domino Rally is a Wii exclusive as far as I'm aware, but there are other games that Totally Spice, Totally Party and things like that I think would be better games as a PS2 game. Disney Princess Enchanted Journey, I think, would be a better game as a PS2 game as well, probably. I think, maybe, did I have a problem with the motion controls in that game? I can't remember. I don't remember them feeling substantial. I can say that much at the very least. Enchanted Journey is such a minor, a relaxed game overall. I don't think it really got in the way, so maybe that wouldn't really matter. I feel like we had a conversation on stream about it when we talked about that game, but I think maybe I kind of came away with this is fine how it is. There's a PC version of it as well, but definitely Totally Spies, Totally Party. Unfortunately, some of those mini games just do not do well with the motion controls, or at least I could not get them to work well. A lot of times with the Wii, it's something to keep in mind is that like sometimes a game's just looking for a particular type of motion, and if the game doesn't do a good job of communicating that motion to the player, it can be really hard to succeed in those things. So that is like a big problem with the Wii in general. Especially early Wii games that don't have gyro. So, but I definitely think Domino Rally is a very cool game that I think if you're a fan of the Wii, you should definitely check out. And especially if you're a fan of like the Wii's controls, you want to see like it pushed to its absolute limit. That's a great way to do it. And it's definitely very playable and beatable, but it just would be an easier and more enjoyable experience, I think, with the controls being more standard controls. And I wouldn't be surprised if on Dolphin you could set something like that up, which is the Wii emulation stuff. So anyways, that's it for that. Thank you again, Jillian, for your question. And thank you, Ben, for your answer. Hey, I didn't mark my list here right, but it is the Xbox Direct Summer Games Fest segment of this show. Like I said, we're not going to go over every announcement. We used to kind of do that stuff, and I just don't think it's really valuable, honestly. So I'm just going to kind of touch on things that I think were most relevant to us here, and kind of give my thoughts on anything that I feel like I might be able to say something a bit more uniquely about. But anyways, one thing I do want to say, if you've been listening to me talk about, press conferences and stuff in recent years, you're going to know what I'm going to say here, and I'm going to try to keep it short because I don't want to like beat a dead horse. But the Xbox Direct, I believe, I need to go back and check. I believe they said they were going to focus on gameplay stuff. But what really it was like in-engine stuff. There was very little gameplay at the Xbox event. And that is one of the most frustrating things to me of any event is when I can't tell what your video game is. There's like a segment on like Hellblade 2 and like they showed like 2 seconds of a character walking through like a field and he turned around and like threw their spear at like a giant thing and the thing just was like, oh, like don't hit me with that. And then like the rest of the whole presentation was just like a girl like sitting there staring in the water, like hearing voices in her head freaking out, which I mean is fine, but like that doesn't tell me anything about your video game really. I mean, it does tell me it's something about your story, but like I want to know what your video game is, so please show me your video game. Like that in addition to your gameplay, please. But I don't know. I assume that this stuff works. Otherwise, why would you do it? So anyway, Summer Game Fest, I think, was like a better execution of that stuff. I think there's a lot more gameplay there. I do think one thing that I don't think is like super helpful to me either, though, is when there are long segments of gameplay unedited. While I am okay with that, I kind of just think like a nice, well-timed, well-cut trailer that takes up like, 2 minutes at most is usually like what I really want. Like, show me the highlights of your video game, man. And that's just what I want to see. But, I assume they do these ways because they are, either can let them present the game in a better light or because people respond better to those things. So, that's just my own personal feelings with that stuff. Anyways, specific game stuff. Final Fantasy VII Ever Crisis was at the Summer Game Fest show. If you don't know, this is the Final Fantasy VII mobile game that is a interesting like compilation of a bunch of Final Fantasy VII story stuff into one experience that kind of in some ways looks like the original Final Fantasy VII with like chibi characters that kind of like stand around on the map and stuff like that. But then when you go into combat, it's the high quality kind of like Final Fantasy VII remake character models in combat. But because it's a mobile game, there's like clothes gotcha and things like that, and armor and weapons and stuff. So it's kind of interesting in that way, like visually being very distinct from like Final Fantasy VII, that like all these characters are like their attires evolving as they're playing. There's no like overworld as far as I can tell. It is just kind of like jumping from mission to mission to mission, but that's kind of expected for this kind of game. So I'll be curious to see if people rip those outfits out of there and put them back into Final Fantasy VII Rebirth at some point. But it's in beta this week, I believe, or this month. So I think people are playing it at the moment. I haven't seen any impressions about it. I don't have like a lot of direct interest in this game from like a gameplay perspective. I think it looks fine. But was really kind of stood out to me was the weird amount of Final Fantasy VII The First Soldier representation in this trailer. So if you don't know, Final Fantasy VII The First Soldier has kind of like a canon group. So the First Soldier is the one that was like the Battle Royale game I was playing. It has like a canon group of main characters in there that are a team of 3. And those characters are pretty heavily represented in this trailer. So like part of me like super respects them going in hard on those 3 characters that were just in the opening video for for Soldier, and then basically making them play a major role in Ever Crisis. So I kind of appreciate that. I am curious to see what their story is, but I don't know if I'd actually go away and do that myself. So maybe I'll like look up some cutscenes later or something like that. No deep ground in there though. They did have a Final Fantasy VII Rebirth trailer as well. I think you know what that game looks like if you've been looking at Final Fantasy video games for a while. I think so. I don't think I need to say too much about that. I would like to play it at some point. Just it's not happening anytime soon. So. This is not a part of Summer Game Fest. I mean, I would have loved if Jeff Keighley came out on stage and said this, but it just as a heads up, Dragon Quest Champions, they did announce that it actually was going to go live June 13th, which by the time you're hearing this in Japan will be June 13th. So basically it will be live. I don't know if we'll do any follow up on that, but I figured I'd at least say that it came out or is coming out for that. They showed off a new Sonic game, Sonic Superstars, at Summer Game Fest as well. No real strong thoughts from my side in terms of the type of Sonic game it is. I'm not a huge fan of 2D Sonic typically. I mean, I'm okay with it. I just don't like get excited for it. I think games that merge 3D and 2D are the things I prefer looking at more. Although I think there's a balance that needs to be struck. That's like my biggest problem with Generations is I don't think it's balanced in that way. And then so a lot of it's kind of 2D gameplay, and I just like it's fine. I just would prefer that bounce back and forth. It just feels like the 3D sections just aren't super well represented in Generations. Anyways, Sonic Superstars kind of goes just, I think for the most part, all 2D. There's like some mini game kind of stuff that's worth 3D, but that's I think historically been true for a lot of Sonic games in the past. But kind of the key thing here is that it's a multiplayer game as well. So you can have the 4 players. I think you play Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, and Amy, I believe. And so I'm really curious kind of how that will work. If it's going to be something where you are expected to play with each other and engage with each other during that stage, or if it's more or less just something where you play the stages together and then, once everybody's wrapped up, you move on to the next stage. Given the type of games 2D Sonic games are, I really have a hard time imagining a world where that is like a very cooperative experience. But I would love to be proven wrong on that. And I know there are 2D Sonic games that have done more. Like we were talking about it in the Discord on like a movie night as well. The Sonic Fire and Ice game on 3DS, and it seems like those have more like puzzle platforming elements to them, even though they're 2D games. So that could maybe be something along those lines that would be interesting. But my multiplayer group did show some interest in it, so there's a good chance that I will eventually play that with a full set of 4 players. But they typically try to hold off on stuff until it's cheap enough, and nobody in there I think is like a really big Sonic fan, so I'd imagine it's going to be, basically waiting a handful of years until it gets cheap enough for that. Couple new Like a Dragon games, just as a reminder. I think at some point we'll cut this off, but the Like a Dragon series used to be the Yakuza series. We haven't talked about it basically since that happened, so I thought it'd be worth mentioning at least one more time here. So this is the new Yakuza game, but they're called Like a Dragon now, and they showed off 2 of them at the Summer Game Fest. They showed off Like a Dragon, I think it's called Infinite Money or something like that. I don't have the actual name in front of me, but I think that's what it's called. And it was no gameplay or anything like that, but it seems built on the Yakuza 7 branch of things, the main character there. So assuming they kind of continue with that trend, that means that's the RPG one. I am interested in playing Yakuza 7 at some point, but what really caught my eye about this game though is that it seems to be set in Hawaii. Or at least some American coast. I would assume Hawaii, just because recently I've been told that like Japan has some connection with Hawaii and all that stuff, so it just kind of makes sense to me that that's where it would be. But it is kind of just like on the beach somewhere, essentially. And the guy is like, there, and a bunch of Americans are talking English at him. So I'm somebody who is a big believer that the Yakuza series probably should try different areas and environments. I think that's part of why I like Yakuza 2 on the PS2, because it does take you to new places, and I also like Okinawa and Yakuza 3 as well. But anytime you go back to Kamurocho, I'm just kind of like, I don't really want to be here anymore. I'm kind of done with this. And it sounds like they kind of doubled down on Kamurocho for a long time after Yakuza 3, which is really disappointing for me. I mean, I'm not going to say for sure that that's the case because I haven't played them, but that is generally the impression I get. And so seeing them go to a place like Hawaii, I think is really cool. And hopefully that is a meaningful aspect of that game and a large portion of that game. I think the problem with like Okinawa and I forget the places, like some place in Osaka and Yakuza 2 is, those are like sub-segments of those games, so they're not the big part of it. Like Okinawa plays a big role in Yakuza 3, but like Kamurocho is kind of where the bulk of things happen, unfortunately. The bulk of events happen, which, I think I like the story of the Okinawa island better because it focuses on more small-time Yakuza groups, where once you get back to Kamurocho and Yakuza 3, like, you kind of get back to the big-time groups, and it's kind of like this weird thing of just, like, why is Kiryu here? And, like, what's the point of this? Like, it's the problem that Yakuza 3 has where, like, it's trying very hard to give Kiryu a reason to go back and fight the Yakuza, like, groups or something like that, or get engaged with them, when he really doesn't need to be anymore. But, it's tough. They kind of wrote themselves in a way that they were like, oh, like, this is the end of the series, and they're like, we gotta keep making these. So I do have Yakuza 4 and 5 on PS4, so maybe some point in my life I'll check those out. But Yakuza 3, I think, was plenty for me recently. Yakuza 3 is my favorite of those games, so I really enjoyed it. But I just don't have a lot of enthusiasm for 4 or 5 at this moment, at least as an outsider to those games. At the Xbox show? No, I'm sorry. Like a Dragon Infinite was an Xbox show thing. Infinite Money. Like a Dragon, the man who erased his name was a Summer Games Fest thing. This is the spin-off game featuring Kazuma Kiryu from the main Yakuza franchise, but this time he's kind of like an undercover FBI agent. For the most part, it is set in Kamurocho as far as you can tell, so I'm a little disappointed in that regard, but I can't ask too much. I do like that it is like kind of like a weird FBI undercover version of Kazuma. He's like in a suit and tie and stuff like that. And it kind of looks like maybe it's a little like dumb in a way that's like kind of fun, of like they bring back like the Yakuza 2 Golden Castle that was like, I don't want to get into it. Yakuza 2 has this weird scene where like a golden castle like emerges from the ground. I don't know. It's been a long time. We streamed it, and I remember it being like there and being like, what the heck is this thing? Or maybe it's like the castle splits in half and there's a golden castle inside of it. I don't know. Seems like it has that castle again. So if they want to lean into something stupid like that, I'm all for that. But I'll need to see it. There's like this cool little whip thing Kazuma has in that game as well, where you can like grapple people and throw them around. But I'll need to watch that game. Like I said, I have a lot of other Yakuza games that I would like to play eventually, or I would play in front of it if there's nothing that really jumps out at me about this one. And so far, there's things that jump out at me, but nothing to like make me go, oh, this is the one I'm going to play, kind of thing. Not a lot to say about this, but Bandai Namco showed off Sandland. I actually looked at Sandland fairly recently because, like, I think an anime series was announced for it, or like an anime movie or something like that, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. And I was like, I wonder if there'll be a game, and sure enough, Bandai Namco is making a game. The big thing I wanted to bring up this for is that it is not an arena fighter, which is always kind of a nice thing with Bandai Namco. It's like an open world kind of game. I don't think I particularly have a lot of interest in what it is, but it has that kind of like Toriyama art style. Big kind of like desert area. It reminds me a little bit of like Mad Max to some extent in terms of like aesthetic too. In the Toriyama style, I guess you could say, the Dragon Ball Z artist guy basically, and the Dragon Quest artist guy. So it looks neat, and it looks like it's a lot of variety. I'll be curious to see how it turns out. If it turns out to be kind of a middling thing, or if it is actually good. It looks like it could very well end up being one of those games that like has a bunch of ideas and they're interesting, but none of them are executed on well. I forget when they said that's coming out, though. And the last news story here, so there's a bunch of Persona stuff that got showed off at the Xbox event, like a remake of Persona 3 and like a tactics game. I think the tactics game's coming to Switch. I assume the remake of Persona 3 is coming to a bunch of platforms. I actually didn't look at it. Maybe I should have. But the more interesting thing to me is that the Project Refantasy, which is like this project they announced a long time ago at Atlas, they finally revealed what that looks like. It has a new name, Metaphor Fantasio, and it is a Xbox and PC only game right now, which is interesting. I tried to look into it just to make sure that it wasn't just the fact that like it was at that trailer, but the website also only says Xbox and PC right now. So that's not to say that PlayStation won't be a part of that launch lineup, but I think eventually it'll end up on PlayStation for sure. But curious to see how long Microsoft plans to hold on to that thing. But yeah, it essentially looks like Persona, but in a different world and stuff like that. Which, I think that's probably fine for the most part. I mean, that's kind of just the Shin Megami Tensei series in general. And while it's not labeled as Shin Megami Tensei, I believe, it looks close enough. I mean, that's kind of how it is. Like, is Maken X for the Dreamcast a Shin Megami Tensei game? No. But it's close enough. visually, story-wise, setting, aesthetically. There's a lot of things that kind of cross over, even though it's not really a part of that series. But interesting that it's coming to Xbox and PC only at this moment. But, again, that doesn't necessarily mean it won't come to PlayStation. If anything, it will very likely come to PlayStation. Just depends on when it will come to PlayStation, I think. So, anyways. But yeah, that's kind of it. I didn't really have any other thoughts otherwise. It's one of those things that, I don't know what I want out of these Xbox events and things like that. A lot of these games, I look at them and go yeah, that's a video game, and those could be okay. And if I played them, I'm sure I would enjoy checking them out. But I just don't have the time for all these video games. And I play a mix of old games and new games. So that means that, especially so, a lot of games I just kind of look at and I'm like, neat, I'll never play that. There's a game called Lies of P that seems to be really excited, or people seem to be really excited about, and I think it looks nice. But yeah, it's one of those games I look at and I'm like, that looks nice, I'll never play it. So yeah. Anyways, but yeah, these all look like fun little games at the very least. So I think, solid showing for what it was. Maybe it doesn't have the kind of big, hey, here's the reason to upgrade to an Xbox Series X and PlayStation 5 kind of thing that, maybe some people, maybe myself, I guess, that maybe to some degree. I don't know if I actually care. I'm perfectly happy with my PS4 Pro right now. I'm playing Street Fighter 6 on PS4 Pro, and it's perfectly fine for the most part. Unless you really are picky about stuff like the loading times are slow, there's some frame rate issues, but it's all playable. That stuff doesn't really bother me. So maybe nothing out at this show that really jumps out at me is I gotta get. But, inevitably, a lot of these games are only coming to those next-gen platforms, so it is something that, will eventually kind of push you that direction. But a lot of these games that look like that they are next-gen only, I think they look like they could have been on the past generation consoles, but, just moving on. That installed base of people who are actively purchasing there is going to get smaller and smaller and smaller, so less reason to do it. And as we get into 2024, absolutely more so. So we'll see. I think I'm kind of waiting for a PS5 Pro at this point is what probably will end up happening. I just think it's, been late enough that I'd rather just get a revision of whatever the current console is rather than go in right now on the PS5 at the moment. But we'll see. I don't know. There's just nothing really jump out at me. Final Fantasy 16 is kind of the one thing at the moment, and I have plenty of other Final Fantasy to play in the meantime. But instead, I chose to play Arc Rise Fantasia. Anyways, that's it for this week. Thanks for coming. OneControlWorld.com is the website. Like I said, there are 3 videos on Ko-fi that you can consume if you would like to. It's only $1 one-time donation, and you get access to those videos for the entire month, I believe. I'm working on some stuff still. I talked about the Xeno stuff last week, but like I said, I had kind of a busy personal week last week, so unfortunately I just didn't get a lot of time to work on a lot of things that I probably should have worked on. But I'm hoping this week that I'll be back on the train. I got some PCFX stuff I got to wrap up here very quickly and get that all done. But anyways, I hope you guys have a great week, and I think there's an Ubisoft thing that's happening on Monday, which, at the bright side, Ubisoft generally has some pretty cool stuff usually, but it is kind of cool in the way that it's an EA game with a little bit of flavor, I feel like. So I don't know how much we'll talk about, but if something jumps out at me there, I'm sure we'll talk about it. So bring back, what was it? Killer Beings from Outer Space or whatever, what Zombie U originally was. Killer Freaks from Outer Space is what it was called. Where it was the rabbits in alien form that they were shooting. Bring that back, baby. Bring back Zombie U, baby. I made a post on Twitter about Zombie U. That game's awesome, man. If you're man, Nintendo messed up on the Wii U and didn't use the gamepad in interesting ways, play Zombie U. Zombie U is a game that takes the problems of the gamepad and makes them a good thing, which Nintendo I don't think did. So, I really, tons and tons of respect to the team who worked on Zombie U. They understood, I think, that platform better than Nintendo and what they could do with it in a lot of ways, which I think is fascinating that they did. I think Zombie U is a great game overall as well. I think people don't like the roguelike elements of stuff, and, the story's a little loose, unfortunately. So that kind of gimmick, I think, ultimately hurts it, where, the character has one life and they die. So I think that's something that, is maybe something that most people don't really care for, but yeah, I think the game itself is solid enough, and if you're really curious about a game that really uses the Wii U gamepad to its fullest extent, play Zombie U. Hope you have a great week. Bye!